Thank you, Heather, and good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to welcome you all back to Tarragon Theatre on this beautiful, beautiful Sunday to both see interior design by the incredible Rosa Laborde and also for this really, really special talk with Andi Schwartz and Rosa. It's such a pleasure. I want to take a moment to introduce the both of them, and I just turned to them both to say, I want to do the best job possible to paraphrase their incredible, incredible careers and accomplishments. So please bear with me. They both have achieved so much. Andi Schwartz, right to my left, is a writer, feminist scholar working at the intersection of digital culture, feminist media studies, and critical femininity studies. She's interested in examining how a range of femininities, especially queer femininities, and specific cultures of femininity are constituted through the interplay of affective attachments and cultural production. Andi's reporting, commentary, and essays on femme, feelings, friendship, feminism, and pop culture have been published in Extra, Horizons, This Magazine, Shameless, Flair, Guts, and so many more. And also, Andi's writing can also be found in the popular scene series Soft Femme. Andi is a research associate with the Center for Feminist Research at York University, a founding member of its Critical Femininities Research Cluster, and she's currently the treasurer of the Sexuality Studies Association and has been a faculty member in the Women's and Gender Study at St. Francis Xavier University. And fun fact, Andi is also a Scorpio sun, Libra moon, and Taurus rising. Are you a Leo, Rosa?
I sure am. With a Pisces rising and a Virgo moon.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Andi, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Rosa Laborde, a playwright that you don't need any further introductions. She is a Tarragon stalwart and is described in Now magazine as, how can she be so multi-talented? Which I love. But it's true. Rosa is a performer, a playwright, a screenwriter, and a mentor and an educator, and has done so much for the arts communities in all of her writing and performance. For Tarragon specifically, you may have seen her plays Marine Life, Hush, and Leo, and Light. Yes. And she was also the Tarragon's Glasgow Playwright in Residence from 2019 to 2021. As a playwright, other than from work at Tarragon, she's been produced at Buddies in Bad Times, the Great Canadian Theatre Company in Ottawa, Neptune Theatre, Touchstone, Fire Hall in Vancouver, the Belfry in Victoria, and she's been a finalist for the Governor General's Literary Drama Award, Dora Mavermore Award for both performance and writing, and she's currently commissioned at Stratford. So please stay tuned for further writing from Rosa. She's also works plenty in TV. You may have seen her work both also in television. She's written Nesting for Crave and the HBO Canada's Emmy-nominated show Sensitive Skin, starring Kim Cattrall.
Oh gosh.
And I'll just start this from the inception of it, of starting as an actress. Rosa studied at the Oxford School of Drama in England. And so thank you for joining us, and thank you for being back at Tarragon.
Thank you for coming on this beautiful day. Coming to actually share space with us is like very, very humbled and grateful.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. To start us off, one of my greatest pleasures in these Tarragon talks is getting to do a deep dive into both of our wonderful humans. And
I
yes.
turned my hearing aids on.
Oh, absolutely.
On the edge of just being able to hear you. If you
Great.
already good voice is just a shade, it would make me stop struggling, please.
Absolutely. Thank you. Is this better? Better?
What you said?
Thank you. One of my great pleasures in researching both of these incredible humans is the core of where they started and how that rebounded and reflected into their work for years to come. And so I was so inspired by reading on your website around how you started and grew up in Herongate and were surrounded by multicultural intersections of life, and that you were able to make your career, your love when you were a child, into the career you have now. And then similarly, reading about Trudy, your best friend in small town Ontario, and how that core friendship led into sort of your research into the necessity of community, the necessity of family. And so I wanted to start us off with a question around family and friendship. For you, Rosa, in other interviews, you've spoken about how family is so integral to your life and your work. And I was curious for the both of you, what is that line between friendship and family, and when do they intersect?
My relationship to family is really interesting. Can you hear me? Sort of. I have a bit of a reverb too, Mike. Is that okay?
We'll figure it out.
Okay. Because my parents was one of these, like, they were together for a year. My mother's an immigrant from Chile. My father was here. I didn't grow up in a traditional nuclear family. So I have 3 siblings, but we're all like, I have no full sibling that is from my 2 parents. So my family became a combination of people that you are related to by blood and people that you're not. And I've had 2 stepfathers, 3 stepmothers, like and some of them, like my stepmother, my father's second wife, the mother of my brother, who is one of my closest people, she hasn't been with my father for over 20 years and is one of the closest people in my life, and comes here and helps take care of my daughter on days where I can't pick her up. Mm-hmm. So for me, family is friendship, and friendship, it all sort of bleeds. And some of my friends are like my relatives too, that I've just kept there. So I wrote about one of my best friends in the Playwrights Note, and she will come here, and it's been over 30 years that she's been my friend. So it is so important. It's very unclear where it really does bleed together. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really lovely. And it's just making me think, just to put my academic hat on, thinking about, and the characters in your play pose this question, what is friendship, right? And it's such an interesting question, but often when we're talking about, like when I've done interviews with people about their friendships for part of my academic work, they'll describe this friend, try to describe the significance of a friendship by equating it to family. Mm-hmm. Like they're like family, she's like a sister. So it is really interesting how we're trying to explain the significance of friendship through the metaphor of family often. And so what you're just describing actually demonstrates those lines are very blurred. For me, my friend Trudy, she's been my friend for 29 years. And, we've been friends when she's lived in different countries, when we've lived in different provinces. And and I think it is from growing up in this small place in Puslinch, Ontario, where with a donkey sanctuary, which is an amazing place. But we grew up together. So she's part of that. My foundations, and she knows, and she's been close with my family through all of the difficulties, and she knows everything. And there's something about not having to explain your family to somebody, and having someone who just gets it, that just makes you feel like at home. Yeah.
It's really true, and thank you for making that reference to the play, because in interior design, you're going to see such a prism of all the ways friendship is interrogated, celebrated, and also poked at. Mm-hmm. And Rosa, you did such a beautiful job of articulating these characters as friends, as family, but then sometimes as rivals. Mm-hmm. And it's such a blurry line in what you're articulating. And it led me to a research of one of your papers or publications, Andi, around chosen family. And I quote, this was from Extra Magazine, published in 2020, around the article's name was How Female Friendship Helped Me Celebrate My Bisexuality. It's a fairly common thing among queers and others whose childhood homes and blood families have become sources of trauma and conflict, for friends to become players in support networks, chosen families that have long been integral to queer survival. And it's something that I wanted to talk around, is the necessity for friendships, the necessity for interdependence, as you articulate in some of your papers. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to ask around the intersections of identity into your friendships and how you navigate that in your research and in your personal life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so most of my research about friendship, is definitely informed by my own experience with friendship and my friends being so important to me. When at times when your family doesn't get you, right, and you need somebody who does. But and I've lost my train of thought. Yeah, what was I just gonna say? I don't know. Okay, yeah, so here's what it was. So when I was thinking about, I'm looking at femme friendships in particular in my research. And so I started to understand these as something that's not, and again, the language of friendship is so interesting, it's so limited, because I'm about to say, not just about being friends, that being friends is everything, but it has also kind of become something about being in solidarity, having an alliance, a political alliance, right? Somebody who's like on your side and stands up for you because they know not only like what you're going through on a personal level, like what's going on with your own family, but what you're facing like in the world, right? Like, especially, so I'm talking about queer friendships, so people who are experiencing homophobia structurally, like not only being, excised from their homes, but, what they have to navigate at work, in public, all of that stuff, and having somebody who supports you and advocates for you and helps you, face and advocate for change is also part of friendship. And so that's, I think, where it becomes like solidarity and an alliance in addition to this pleasant way to spend time together. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the solidarity and the alliance is something that I also feel connects to Rosa.
Yeah.
And in your play, all of your characters, there's spoilers, I'm gonna leave it, but there's a wonderful joke about sort of the different walks of life that these friends come together from at a young age. And so I wanted to talk about what was the process like, diving into the intersections of each of these characters and then finding the ways that they cross paths in their friendship.
Well, I was really interested in, one, because I grew up in a very multicultural neighborhood, but also what happens to all of us, children of immigrants, and we come together in a Western culture and we kind of become homogenous. Like something happens, and with women especially, it feels very related to commerce. Like it's like all of a sudden, Sex and the City, the whole world of like what we buy, what we seem like, what women are becomes constructed out of this new idea that's not quite where we culturally all came from. I don't understand what I'm saying exactly, but it's something that I think about a lot. Like I try to understand how we ended up where we are, and then, but so what I was looking for is like, what's the point of commonality that we all have? Because in the play, they're culturally distinct characters. So where is the part that we meet? And actually that part where we meet is the part where we are all culturally distinct, even though it's not the same culture, we meet in this one place, and in this place we are also all women, but it's something they talk about, and I think the more we embrace each other's cultures, the more we come together, the world only gets better. And at the same time, I don't know, it feels like when we're doing that, something's in charge, and it feels more about like becoming subsumed by a capitalist culture is like the way that I sort of describe it, that it's like who's in charge of this new thing that we're becoming. And I was curious about that. I don't think that I fully explored that all the way in the play, which I almost never do. I have very big ideas, and then what you see is like the little one that I managed to write. That's how I feel. But I was really interested in like how we come together with all these differences, and what is it that holds us.
Absolutely. It reminds me of in the beautiful playwrights program that you can read the beautiful playwrights note in the program before you see the show. Take a read, because Rosa, you do articulate that this stemmed from a period of isolation during the pandemic, or a huge process of writing it was. And what was that like to navigate writing about friendship in that particular time?
Well, I feel like the pandemic was a really interesting like equalizer, where you suddenly went, who really are my friends? Because we couldn't see each other, and who you chose to keep in contact with, or also different people's reactions to being in a pandemic. How careful some people were versus other people who wanted to be vaccinated, who became an anti-vaxxer that you didn't know that was going to happen. Just all the different layers of existing in this new world, and that it made you go, if I have this little bit of time and I can only get this close to another person, who do I make the effort for to go and stand in a driveway in the cold? Or And I think it really made us look at our personal relationships, and at the same time, the isolation, the loneliness, made it so apparent that friendship it's part of our health. It's part of our mental health. It's part of our ability to feel connected to something greater, because without it, we can feel really lost.
Yeah, thank you. And how would you say that your research has grown from the time that you started? I'm quoting specifically from an article you wrote in 2016, also an extra, around how internet, that lots of friendships, and especially queer friendships, stabilized and or found commonality within the internet. Yes. How has that shifted for you 8 years later?
Yeah, so it's really, really interesting to think about. And so again, thinking about why we need friendships, especially if we are from like a marginalized background or occupy a marginalized position, like some of the women in your play coming together around that. And, I was talking about queer femmes as well. But sometimes like our communities, even though you grew up in a very multicultural community, some people grow up in Bushland, Ontario, and, we have donkeys there, but not a ton of people. So the internet, which I did not have when I was growing up, but can be a way that you can find people that are like you, right, or and encounter new ideas. So that has been very vital for all kinds of friendships, right? But certainly for people who are looking to connect with somebody who's like them, if they're like a queer child or queer teen, the internet's been very helpful. And it's also really changed how we think about friendships, period, and communities in general. Because communities are, initially we would think about these as like a local, like a geography, your community where you live. But then with something like the internet and having online communities, your networks have almost no bearing on where you live. And even things like friending is now a verb, because you can friend someone online, and like,
yes.
It just really changes like what we think about friendship. And then of course, like the internet through the pandemic, through lockdowns, was so vital to maintaining some of our friendships. Yeah. I'm sure many of us are looking back and being like, we went to parties on Zoom. That's like very strange. That was a dark time. But thank goodness that we had that, because otherwise, especially if you live by yourself, or if you were in you were sheltering in a place that was like not great, it could again be another lifeline. So I haven't really. So most of my research about friendship happened kind of before 2020. Like I was doing my fieldwork 2018, 2019. Right. But I haven't actually got to explore like academically or how the pandemic has altered friendships that I remember for myself. Like what you're saying about, you notice like, who am I reaching out to? Who am I? Who's reaching out to me? Right? How are these bonds being maintained? Yeah, a lot through the internet.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. It's so true. A quote from that article in particular that really jumped out that I wanted to share with you all because of how inspiring it was for me was that online spaces are often the antidote of feeling unsafe and unseen in public, even queer spaces. Sometimes a retreat from the public domain is necessary. The internet can provide sanctuaries where we can connect, and that was you quoting someone you were interviewing, Kim Katrina Milan. And so I share that with you all as a prism of what and how our friendships continue to grow beyond our lived spaces. But also social media has also been an actual plot point in interior design that you're going to see. Oh, yeah. And I wanted to ask you, Rosa, how did interrogating social media affect the conflict within your play or for these characters?
I find social media fascinating and weird, but also just such a part of our life now. And I want to point out, actually, Anamika's here, who used to work at Tarragon, works at Rosemead now, and one of the things that happened in the pandemic was there were a bunch of women in theater who happened to be pregnant, and the artistic director of the Great Canadian Theatre Company now put together a WhatsApp group of women who were going suddenly in lockdown. And we met people. I knew Anamika before, but there's several I didn't know, and one who's become one of my dearest friends, and her son is now my daughter's best friend. And just like you look at it that way and you go, well, that's amazing. Like we created fully a new network in that time.
I'll never forget being here just in the lobby and both of us looking at each other going, we're pregnant together. Within 3 weeks we were due, within 3 weeks of each other. And it was right before lockdown.
Right
we were
before.
Standing here.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, this is great, we'll have babies together, maybe we'll see each other at baby things. And then the pandemic happened and we basically wrote to each other every single day, and we still do. We're still very much
We're on
connected.
this big network. It's crazy,
Wow.
so it's wild. So that's the positive.
Yes.
But I find, and I think it's because I've seen it also happen in friend groups that I'm a part of, is there can be a kind of persona building that happens on social media that can become off-putting to people who are close to the person.
Yeah.
And it create this thing, this person you have this intimate kind of connection with, and you think, oh, I know them and I really like them. And then they post or they do, and it becomes, you watch, I've watched people go, I can't be friends with them anymore. Literally just because of how they are presenting themselves. And I find that fascinating. And it's such a weird thing because with one person I have seen people try and say, but they're just like, well, we're worried about you. It just seems like a lot of posting, a lot of selfies with a lot of information. But no one can just say, it's just weird. Don't do it. It's so weird. People find it so weird. They're like really off-put by it. And so you're in this kind of thing where you're like, but who is the person? Because now the online persona is very much its own alive thing, and sometimes it's the only thing we have if someone's in Vancouver and you're here and you're and I just find that I go, what is it that makes us want to perform? And then I go, who are you performing for if your friends don't like it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I find that just wild. And it's also pervasive because every woman, we had so many beautiful actresses come in and read for the show, and they were like, this is true. So it's happening.
Yeah.
This is happening, and yet it's not going anywhere. It's not stopping, but it's actually this thing that has this incredible ability to connect us, also has an incredible ability to divide us and create false intimacies and actually destroy burgeoning intimacies or greater intimacies. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of feelings about it.
And then you wove it into the play itself as a
Yeah.
actual sort of construction and then deconstruction. Anyway, spoilers again, but I look forward to talking to you all about it after the show. I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of the personality that you were just talking about within friendships, and also something that can often feel radical in just existing in the world that you wrote about, the difference between hardness and softness in sort of femme personalities. And I wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind explaining a little bit to our audience around the difference between those two terms.
Okay. So I'm going to just assume that we all know what femme means, and if you don't, that's okay. But so the way that I come to this idea of softness is through queer femme culture. And so when I was first encountering this concept of femme, I learned about it. The key text I remember is this book called Brazen Femme. I don't know if any of you have read this book, but it came out in 2002, and on the covers, it's a photograph of the artist Anna Camilleri, and you can't see her face, it's her torso, and she's wearing black, and she's stabbing a knife into the seat between her legs, and the book says Brazen Femme on it. So this is the image of femme that I grew up with, someone who's tough, she's wearing a mini skirt, she's got a knife, but as you might be able to tell from even just looking at me, I'm not really like that. I like pastels, we both like pastels. I'm pretty soft-spoken. I don't have any knives, except for, for butter. And so I wanted to be femme. I was like, yes, I identify with being like a feminine person who wants to do femininity a little bit differently and queerly, but yikes, I cannot be this person. So softness to me is a way of still being femme and doing femininity in this queer way that is just more true to who I am. In my research, I kind of explore how the hard femme, the brazen femme, kind of comes out of this moment in the 90s when post-structuralist theory and queer theory were really kind of building and being very influential in culture and in academia. It was being subversive, deconstructing things. But then my moment is more like, I kind of grew up in like a post-feminist moment where girls could and should be everything and do everything. And there's just a lot of pressure. And so softness, the way that I've explored it through my research, is really about just kind of refusing to do everything, refusing to be tough when things are hard, and actually, being soft and being like, this hurts me, right? This is difficult, and kind of just letting that kind of femininity, that kind of soft femininity, kind of come out and be a kind of its own political statement of refusing these expectations that we do it all, be it all, continue to produce even though conditions are terrible, all of these things. So for me, that's sort of like where softness comes from, and I explored it in my research through like the aesthetics, like, hyper feminine pastel aesthetics, like maybe how I'm dressed, right? So that kind of softness, but also this, so kind of interesting coming off your comments about, online personas. There's also, I found there's, in this moment when I was doing my research on Instagram and femmes culture on Instagram, this interest in being vulnerable and being authentic online. And it was often how we would see vulnerability or authenticity was through sharing a lot of your feelings, right? Sharing what's difficult, sharing, what's, if you're having a triggering or traumatic experience, sharing that and being just really upfront about what you're going through. So it's something to me that has like this aesthetic component and also a emotional style component, but it also still, I think, has a political value, even though it doesn't maybe look as like impressively bold as the cover of Brazen Femme. It is kind of taking up a critical politic with a sort of different way. So that's how I would explain that.
Thank you so
much. Softness and hardness.
Absolutely. I bring it up because when I was reading that sort of your work on it, it struck me that one way that you categorized hardness was also the use of wit or humor in it. And interior design is so funny.
Yes.
It is so funny in both its softness and its hardness of the characters. And so I wanted to explore and ask Rosa, how did you use humor as a way to explore these characters and these themes?
I don't know. Gosh. How I find things very funny. I find people very funny. I think the thing that I feel that I've been criticized more than anything is like, but this is a very sad topic. Why did you make that funny? And I'm like, because that's how I experience being alive. My personal experience is that things are very painful sometimes and also then very, very funny. And I don't understand how people go, well, but is it a comedy or is it a, like, I don't know what world you live in. I don't live in a world where I wake up one day and it's just a comedy or I wake up one day and it's just a tragedy. It's always both.
Yeah.
And I find that for me, the female friendship can be one of the Barbiest places, and I don't mean Barbie as in the doll, I mean barbs. It can be one of the most fun little world of zingers that we live in. Like all the things that are said, the little comment that you're like, oh, I think that really hurt my feeling, or what did I just say? Or I think there's so much room to explore. Sorry, Mike, I dropped the mic. Okay, is it fine? That really worked out that your name is Mike. Thank you. And I also feel like I enjoy laughter. I feel when storytelling for me is in the world, if I can laugh a little and cry a little, I'm like, I had a good experience. And so that's what I try to do, because that is sort of my experience of existence. It's all happening all at once. Yeah.
Thank you. Before I move it over to our audiences for some of your questions, I wanted to ask one final question. In one of your pieces, you also wrote about how friendship is a political act, or bonded through political events. And certainly, there's a radical hope in both of what you've been talking about today around friendship. Friendship and being together is often a radical thing against the patriarchal society or the systems at play. And so I wanted to ask you now both, what's the radical hope you have for friendship or relationships moving forward in your life?
Wow, that's such a beautiful question.
It really is.
Okay, just a moment to weep. Yeah, no, I love this question, and I don't want to spoil the play, but there's this really excellent moment when the characters they're going through something difficult and they're questioning what is friendship, and is friendship just liking each other? That's a really good question. And so it kind of brings me back to what we were talking about earlier about, friendships being forged out of maybe you're put in the same category because you're different, or maybe you need each other to help you to stand up for each other, right? So I think that friendship isn't just about liking each other. I think there's this other kind of responsibility, to care for each other and not just caring about each other, but caring for in ways that are concrete, material, tangible. And I think, so that's my hope, is that, I don't know about everybody else, but certainly if we can say that we're in a post-pandemic moment, which we're not, but in a post-lockdown moment, I think for me, a lot of my friendships have changed since then. My friendships got very intense in lockdown. And then as we started kind of doing different things, they've changed. And so as life gets busier, it's always getting busier. I hope that my hope for myself is that I can continue to prioritize and make space for friendships. But also I want us to always keep this in mind that, being friends is not just about liking each other. We should like each other, and we do, but it's also this extra thing, this responsibility to care for each other. And I think that even in the pandemic, we saw what that can mean, practically, right? If, showing up when somebody is sick, bringing them things that they need, or if somebody is immunocompromised and they really can't be in a space where people are not wearing masks, make that happen for them so that they can be part of it, right? So that would be sort of my hope, is that we take the caring part, the extra part, of being friends really seriously, and I think that can really transform our world, to be honest. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
I agree. Mm-hmm. I think for me, the world there's so much going on really all the time, mm-hmm. and there can be so much divisiveness, and I always write from a place of the micro, but reflecting outwards to the macro, because I think that real change happens on very small levels between human beings. Mm-hmm. Friendship for me begins in a profound way when you hit a moment that is difficult, and then you figure out how to move through it. It's not just and then we had fun, and then we had fun. It's you hit the part where someone gets very ill, or you have a really big disagreement, or someone marries someone you don't like, and you go, how do we do this? How do we pass through the moment that we don't connect? And can we get through it? Because once you do, then you start to build the foundation of real intimacy and real connection. And it's something that is, I think, as our communities become more fractured and we start to live more and more isolated and alone, not in big communities, and we live more in a social media world where it just is easier to be unkind when you don't have to face the person. It's just easier to comment. It's just easier that we lose something of ourselves. We lose some of our humanity. So my radical hope is every moment, the Dalai Lama, it's still my favorite thing. My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness. That it's really about how do we get through these moments where you and me might not be the same, we might not totally agree, but how do we move forward from that? How do we respect each other and try to listen and try to hold some space for the disagreement? That to me is true friendship, and it's also true diplomacy. It's so for me it's a beautiful question, and also I think really important question for what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you both for those really profound answers. I now invite some questions from our audience, if you have any, to ask our esteemed guests. Yeah, please.
I find if you have not just an acquaintance or a neighbor or even family, a friend, there's a commitment to each other between the two of you. It is a commitment, and they're your friends in spite of who you are.
In spite of, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
It's really hard to think of a question because it's like I just resonate so much with everything you're saying. So
Slow
much.
down, please.
It's okay.
Okay. So I just had a question, like, what are your thoughts on things like queer platonic intimacy? Because I was thinking about how you had the points about like how my bisexuality could have revealed things about friendship, and how there was the theme of the chosen family and how that's so important. And I was just wondering, like, what does things like queer platonic intimacy reveal about who we are as people, and how, if there's anything that can reveal about our own discoveries and roles of different dimensions of relationship.
Yeah, queer platonic intimacies are really very interesting, and there's so much research. Like Kath Weston wrote this great book, Families We Choose, and I think that's sort of where we got the concept or term, I guess, chosen families. But in her research, like, she was kind of looking at how when we don't have these other structures, we just figure it out, right? So we kind of create like things that look like families or act like families, even if they're not these traditional blood ties. So I think that there's a lot of creativity, right, in forming these different kinds of bonds and figuring out how to get what we need when we don't maybe have access to the traditional or the first thought source. So I think that they can really bring out creativity in us, which is really, really cool. And when I was talking about like how my friendships help me celebrate my bisexuality, it's bringing that people who are like you, and you can tell the truth to them. There's something about that, like if you're insecure about queerness in any way, I'll just stick with bisexuality. If you have some insecurity about it, maybe you don't want to tell that to everybody because politically you're like, no, I am proud and I feel great about it. And just because you don't want to give anybody room to say, I knew it, I knew bisexuality was fake, right? So, but you can bring your concerns and your insecurities to people who share your experience, and then you can be like, oh, okay, it's not just me. Like, we're just out here figuring out what this all means. So, so I think that in my experience, like the friendships have been, like queer platonic intimacies have been, just very personally reassuring, and places where we can kind of think politically about some of the issues that we're going through. But then there are also these sources of great creativity where we can think about designing, like their world building, right? Designing our world in different ways that just work better for some of us. So I think they're really, really, amazing. I would keep talking, but thank you for your question. Yeah.
Thank you. Anybody else? A question?
It's not exactly a question.
Please, yes.
I have one of those friendships, like so long, I don't even know, 30 years or something like that, that was deeply affected by the pandemic. So it's the sort of anti-vaxxer, and then found out about the convoy stuff. And when the convoy thing came along, I went, okay, I don't know how to bridge. But just listening to you talk, I thought this idea of, it's not over yet, you know what I mean? So I just appreciate thinking about it again. I will think about it again, based on listening to you guys.
I feel like it's almost like, this is a bad comparison, but you lose someone you love to a cult. And do you just think, and I'm not saying that's a cult, that's not a judgment on what that perspective is, but that it's okay to make a boundary but also hold a space, because you never know where someone comes around, or where you just never know where it's heading, any of this, right? And more and more I have, in my experience with certain things, gone, well, I'm not gonna be able to talk about that. I don't need to go deeper, but if I hold this space, we just don't know right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, me neither.
I know. Good.
Yeah, it's both things. I love what you said about the
Yeah.
tragedy and the comedy. I think that's just, because maybe that will help too, right? It's to hold that idea that, oh, you really pissed me off. Like, I just, you're not caring about people, you're putting yourself first. Where do I fit if you've thrown it, if you've isolated yourself
Yeah.
from everybody else and you're angry at everybody else, then you're angry at me. So it's kind of like, and all the people I've sort of aligned myself with, which it doesn't feel like an alliance, it doesn't feel like that to me, but it's sort of, sometimes you're forced into that situation. So maybe that concept can help a little bit, that we're on the same side and on the wrong side, or the opposite side at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Your comments about the 30 years and suddenly you're on different sides. A very good friend of mine gave me what I think is a sterling piece of advice, is that the secret to a good friendship is getting the distance right.
That's great.
How close do you get to somebody? You can't get close to this person on this topic. Two of my best friends in my building are extreme right-wing. So we don't talk politics. We talk cats, we talk puzzles, we talk jokes. So I've got the distance right.
Thank you for
And
sharing.
when.
And when. Yeah.
But
I
sorry.
was going to pass along a bit of wisdom. I can't even remember who I heard it from. That I guess it's there should be another Murphy's Law that says there should be an 11th commandment. Thou shalt not take thyself so seriously. You're driving yourself and everybody around you crazy, so please lighten up and I'll be here for you.
Thank
Not
you
a
for
bad
sharing
11th
that.
commandment.
Absolutely.
I think another point about friendship is remembering that you don't have some friends forever. Some people are in your life for a time, and it may be they're in your life because you had a baby and they did, and so the children grew up together. But once the children are off doing their own thing, you're looking at each other and thinking, why were we ever friends in the first place?
Right.
So I think
Right.
you have to remember that a friend is not a friend for life. I don't believe they are. I think
Not you two.
over time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
true.
I just wanted to make sure that Andy, you wanted
I
to
just
share
wanted
something.
to comment. I can hear the grief, in your voice when you're telling that story, and I wrote a zine with a friend of mine, Karina Hageline, who lives in New York, and we've actually never met in real life. She's they are an internet friend. We made a zine called, When Friendships End, or When Femships End, actually. And it's something, because we had talked about this, it's something a lot of people go through, right, at the end of a friendship. And it's not something that we talk about very much or know how to deal with. And sometimes it can be really minimized or dismissed because we say, oh, they're just a friend, right? The language that we have to talk about friendship is kind of insignificant, but it's huge grief. It's huge grief, especially something that long, I would say. So I just, kind of wanted to name that too, and that it's really difficult to do. And sometimes, friendships don't last forever, and that doesn't mean that they're failed. It's the same with our other kinds of relationships, right? Maybe they were great for what they were, and we can always cherish those memories, but it is really, really hard. But also sometimes, maybe you'll come back, yeah.
It is. It's a real grief, and that I think I didn't fully answer a question that you asked before of what was going on in the pandemic. Also, because I had I really did realize some of the ones that were gone. I have my very close, but then you realize, oh, I don't think we're friends anymore. That thing where just this much time has passed and we've not been at these significant events of each other, and giving the moment to go, that's quite sad. But there's nothing to do about it. But actually giving a space to the grief of the loss.
Thank you both. It's very felt. Yeah. Any last questions? Oh yes, sorry, thank you so much.
Sorry to speak again, but I guess kind of one thought that comes from this conversation is that maybe one dimension of friendships is that it is lives just intersecting at given moments, and sometimes they may be following different trajectories. Sometimes they just pass by one particular point. Sometimes they may pass at different times and cycle kind of in and out. And sometimes there's like sadness that comes with that, but sometimes there can be, you know, a beauty that comes with that. And maybe that's kind of one way to help us like contextualize friendships that never were, friendships we wish we had all along, friendships we want to give more time to, but have other context behind them. Yeah, like India.
Yeah. Thank
Well,
you.
from your comments, I'm just imagining like beautiful night sky, like friendship, this constellation, and you're just shooting. And like when you make a connection, it's so beautiful. And of course, there's all these other possibilities, and maybe you move on. But it's like when you zoom out, it's something so beautiful. So yeah, thank you for introducing that idea. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful image too. Thank you.
Yeah.
It made me think of how we are all in this room together as constellations, passing each other by in this moment, talking about these beautiful, profound friendships and emotions, and how this moment is very beautiful. So thank you all, and thank you for sharing that image. Any questions? Otherwise, yes, trust in humor was the note. With that, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. Get ready for interior design. Doors will be open downstairs at 2, and please join me in thanking both of our incredible guests, Andi and Rosa. Take care of yourselves and each other, and may we intersect again.